Wow. When you shared this video with us, I gotta say it's intense.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, just the thought of being inches away from a drop, hundreds of feet down, or even like the idea of your skin like melting off in under an hour, it's pretty wild stuff.
Yeah, it really pushes the limits of what we think of as, survivable or even imaginable, really.
Exactly, and it's clear that you're interested in those limits, the extremes, what humans can endure, and also just like the raw power of nature.
I think that's what's so captivating about this whole thing.
Totally. And so today we're diving into this YouTube video called I Survived the 5 Deadliest Places on Earth. It's by MrBeast. And, we're not just going to recap the whole thing.
No, definitely not.
We want to go deeper.
Yeah, we want to understand why these places are considered so deadly.
Exactly.
What makes them so risky?
Yeah, what can we learn about survival,
Absolutely, and about how we react to fear.
Totally. And, the locations themselves are pretty diverse. We've got an African safari at night, an ice climb on this frozen waterfall, Bolivia's Death Road, which is already like a scary name, swimming with sharks, and then Snake Island.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild itinerary.
It is. All right, so let's jump right in. And I think the first location that really struck me was the African safari at night. I mean, just starting in a cage in the middle of a savanna at night.
Yeah, that's a pretty bold way to begin.
It is. And they immediately start talking about lions and cheetahs and even hippos, just roaming around out there.
And the thing is, at night, our vision is so limited, right?
Yeah.
But these animals, they're nocturnal predators. Their senses are heightened.
Right. They have the advantage.
Exactly.
And then they make it even crazier by placing meat around the cage to attract the lions.
Yes, essentially baiting them.
I know. And you see these lions just 20 feet away, their eyes reflecting in the darkness. It's like you can feel the tension.
Oh, absolutely. You can hear it in their voices, too, when they say, we might actually die in this video. They're not even joking.
Right. There's this genuine fear that comes through.
Yeah, it makes you realize how vulnerable we are when we're stripped of our usual senses.
Yeah.
Especially sight in an environment like that.
Yeah, it's like we're so used to being at the top of the food chain, but in that moment, you really feel that power shift.
Totally. And then they completely switch gears, and we're suddenly up in the air being transported by a helicopter to the side of a mountain.
Yeah, to climb a frozen waterfall.
I mean, talk about a contrast, right?
Huge contrast from the flat savanna to this vertical wall of ice.
And the gear they're using, those bladed boots and ice picks, it just shows how extreme this challenge is.
And right away, Nolan is like, nope, I'm out.
Yeah, he takes one look at that drop and decides it's not worth the risk.
It's like a primal fear kicks in.
Totally. But then you see Jimmy struggling, his foot slips, almost falls, and you can hear the panic in his voice.
Yeah, it's terrifying to watch. And he keeps saying things like, I'm fighting the urge to cry, man. He's really pushing himself.
And it makes you think, have you ever been in a situation where you start something and then realize, oh, wow, this is actually way more dangerous than I thought?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And what makes you keep going, or what makes you decide to back out?
Right, it's like a battle between your rational mind and your instincts.
Exactly.
So Jimmy does eventually make it to the top, but then his immediate reaction is like, you know what, Nolan had the right idea?
It's funny, but also kind of sad.
Yeah, it's like he conquered the challenge, but at what cost?
Okay, so next up we have the infamous Death Road in Bolivia, and just the name itself is enough to make you nervous.
Oh yeah, it's notorious, and for good reason. The narrator says it's been responsible for an estimated 300 deaths per year.
That's a staggering number.
It is, and they had to get special permission to even film there because it was closed to the public years ago.
And you can see why right away, the drop-offs are insane, hundreds of feet down, and the road is so narrow in places.
Yeah, and then there's fog rolling in, making it almost impossible to see.
Talk about adding to the tension.
I know at one point they say they're 7 inches from falling to our deaths.
And then the steering wheel jerks unexpectedly.
Yeah.
It's like every moment is a potential disaster.
And then there's this whole sequence where Nolan actually gets out of the car to guide it through this super narrow section.
Yeah, with a massive ravine and a huge waterfall right below.
Literally inches from the edge. It's so stressful to watch.
And then in the middle of all this, they start talking about their Feastables creamy peanut butter cups.
I know, it's so bizarre, this sudden shift to something completely mundane.
It's almost like their brains need a break from the constant fear.
Yeah, maybe it's like a coping mechanism or something.
It makes you wonder how our minds process and deal with extreme situations like that.
It's fascinating. And then they have to cross this really rickety-looking bridge, too.
Yeah, adding another layer of anxiety to the whole experience.
Okay, and then for a bonus location, they decide to go swimming with sharks.
Uncaged in waters known for unprovoked attacks.
Yeah, and you can see these sharks swimming around them. Some of them are huge.
And the fear in Carla Nolan's voices is palpable.
Oh yeah, they're definitely not comfortable.
It's interesting how that fear of the unknown beneath the surface is so primal, you know?
Yeah, it's like a deep-seated instinct.
Totally, like we're not really meant to be in that environment.
All right, so from the ocean depths, we move on to the Amazon rainforest, which seems peaceful at first, but obviously has its own dangers.
Yeah, the Amazon is a prime example of how nature can be both beautiful and deadly.
Exactly, and they specifically talk about the risk of flash floods.
Which are particularly dangerous because they can happen so quickly.
Right, and of course that's exactly what happens to them. A sudden downpour turns their chute into a full-blown emergency.
And the way back is completely flooded, muddy, there's lightning, you can feel the panic rising.
Yeah, someone says, I'm not laughing anymore, I'm actually scared, and it's like the whole mood shifts.
It's a reminder that nature is ultimately in control. We have to respect that.
Absolutely. And then we come to what they call the #1 deadliest place on Earth, Snake Island.
An island literally teeming with venomous snakes.
I mean, it sounds like something out of a horror movie.
They even have to wear special shin guards for protection because the snakes are everywhere.
And they talk about how the venom is so potent, it can cause your skin to like melt off.
And death can occur in under an hour.
It's crazy, but at the same time, the island itself is described as being beautiful.
Yeah, it's this weird juxtaposition of beauty and danger.
Right, and they explain how the snakes mostly hunt birds in the trees now because they've already killed off most of the ground animals.
It's a fascinating example of how a species adapts to its environment.
Totally. And they actually capture some of the snakes to extract venom for anti-venom.
Which is crucial for saving lives. You know, thousands of people in Brazil have been helped by this anti-venom.
And there's this moment where a juvenile snake escapes from its container and the researchers are like surprisingly calm about it.
They're probably used to it at this point, but for anyone else, it would be terrifying.
Oh yeah, for sure. And then they have to camp out on the island overnight.
With the constant fear of snakes getting into their tents.
I can't even imagine, and you can tell they're so relieved when they finally leave the island.
Yeah, that's a palpable sense of relief.
So as we've gone through all these locations, it's clear that deadly can mean so many different things.
Absolutely, from predators to extreme environments to venomous creatures.
And it's been fascinating to explore not just the dangers themselves, but also how we react to them, you know?
Yeah, how we cope with fear, how we push our limits and what it takes to survive.
Totally. And after seeing all of this, I'm curious, what do you think is the most important factor for survival in these kinds of situations?
That's a great question. Is it physical strength, mental toughness, or maybe just a deep respect for the power of nature?
It's something to think about for sure. Thanks for sharing this incredible video with us and taking us on this deep dive.